Hello, people of the internet. My name is JD Shadow. I am hit with a huge dilemma, which I think a lot of people get hit with at some point in their time if they are a public figure. And I'm not that much of a public figure, but I do have a channel here on YouTube, and thus I might want to consider myself a little bit of one. However, they are hit with probably the same thing I am hit with right now. If you are living under a rock and just crawled out of it, you probably have not heard about the raid on the Capitol building during the readout of the Electoral College votes that happened this past Wednesday. If you were not aware, if you were not watching that, what is going on? Where have you been? A group of pro-Trump supporters and pro-Trump protesters who were protesting at the Capitol, there was no problem with that in of itself, even though what they were protesting was absolutely idiotic, seeing as though everyone knows how things were going to turn out and how there was no evidence of any kind of voter fraud whatsoever. They thought there was somehow voter fraud, but be it as it may, they have every right to protest as long as they're not doing what they ended up doing. And this became not only idiotic, but horrific in of the full extent of the word. They decided to storm the Capitol and then get into the building. There had been evacuations of Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, and it ended up with vandalization of the property inside the building, and ended up with a lot of people injured. I think at least 4 people were pronounced dead. I think at least 1, maybe 4. I might be screwing that up a little bit, but it did not bode well for anybody, and that is going without saying. And as with everybody who had watched that and became horrified by it, so did I. That was something that should never be a part of our discourse here in America. That made me embarrassed, that made me saddened, that made me very disappointed as to my standing as an American right now, because this is what we've become. This is who we are. This is not who we should be. And this has no place in our American discourse, no place in our discourse across the world. This has no place whatsoever in any sort of discussion to have these thugs, whether or not you're a right wing or left wing, in order to storm a Capitol building and to essentially lay waste to whoever stands in your way, and to hell with whoever does stand in your way, and to hell with whatever lives or property stand in your way. Property can be replaced. I don't think that they're going to worry so much about the property in the building as much as they are about the lives in the building. Property can be replaced. Statues can be replaced. Lives cannot. And as much as there's some priceless artifacts in that building, in the Capitol building, lives are even more priceless than any kind of artifact. Now, having said that, and this is going to sound weird as I just said something about this, but throughout the nighttime when I was watching the Electoral College votes come in and they got back to business, they didn't let that stop them in any sort of way, I became a bit lost because I was looking through Twitter and some of the people that I read on Twitter, and there was one thing about what I ended up thinking that I think a lot of people also think. Yes, we probably should say something. Yes, we probably should speak out against this sort of thing, against this sort of atrocity that happens in this country, in any country. However, the one thing that I believe needs to be addressed is, what can we say? And that was the dilemma I faced last night. That's what the dilemma I faced while I was looking and watching and seeing all this take place, was what in the world can I say that has not already been said? Where should I start? What should I say? Because not only do I run a YouTube channel, but I run a YouTube channel that sometimes says opinions which some people might not agree with. And let's be quite honest, we have a lot of disagreements. We have a lot of things that we say that many people will say, oh my god, why did you say that? That has no bearing or is completely incorrect. And right now we live in a world where there's these vernaculars like fake news or social justice warriors or alt-right or fringe left wing or whatever you want to use to label somebody. We have all these labels. We have all of this division that goes on. And yes, I do blame Donald Trump for this. I do blame him for this because he is the one person that should be leading the country, who should be getting people together, and instead, either he's nowhere to be found, or he says what could be installed as code words to other people saying, go do what you need to do, but I'm going to say this in order to keep my hands clean. It's like he's the godfather who, no matter what you try to do, you can't get anything to stick on him. You can't get any charge to resonate in order to get him out of office. Maybe this is the time, and yes, it's only 14 days away, maybe 13 days away by the time you watch this, but that's more than enough time for him to do whatever he wants to do. In 14 days or 13 days, he can absolutely lay waste to the country. That is that serious. There's not enough time in the world in order to do anything about it. But in the meantime, there's a lot of other blame that can be thrown around as to why this happened. And during the nighttime, I sat there and I had a bunch of brainstorming going on in my head as to what exactly can be said. Because one, where do you start? A lot of people are saying silence is compliance. But I think the reason why people don't say anything is because most of what they want to say has already been said by everybody else. And when they get to their social media accounts, they're thinking, what else can be said? Are they waiting for me to say something that they should already know about me? That they should already know that I would be against this? That they should have no reason to suspect that I would be with racists or homophobics or bigoted people? And I say the word bigoted to have an all-encompassing word of homophobia and misogyny and racism and transphobia or whatever phobia exists out there in the terms of social justice. I use the term bigoted in order to encompass all of that. But why should I have to say something that people should already know about me? It should be the default status of any human being to condemn the actions of what took place on the Capitol steps that day. We should not have to reinforce that. Maybe they just want to see that reinforcement of that person saying, hey, we're against that, we condemn that, we think that's abhorrent, that has no place in American discourse. And what did that prove? All that happened was that somebody who was on their side ended up getting killed from it. And they didn't stop a thing. They didn't do anything. All they did was make it worse for themselves. They made a senator who was on their side end up reversing their path, reversing their course. They made somebody end up losing their lives who was on their side. What did it accomplish? It didn't accomplish anything. They didn't stop anything. They delayed it. And now you have the President of the United States facing a possible 25th Amendment being placed upon him, maybe another impeachment upon him. What did they accomplish? They didn't accomplish anything. So not only were they horrendous and abhorrent, they were also dumb. They were stupid. There was no way they were going to change anything. They didn't change anything. They didn't scare anybody. Maybe they frightened people at that point in time, but they didn't scare anybody enough to not do their jobs. They got in there and they got the job done. Joe Biden's going to be our next president. Get over it. Move on. It's over. But also, we're also wondering how to say it. If you remember, people were getting on other people for not saying Black Lives Matter correctly. You remember Emma Watson, I think that's who they were getting on, for putting 3 black squares instead of just 1 because she was trying to be symmetrical on Instagram, and they got on her about it. And you notice other people, because they didn't say the correct phrasing of the terms or the correct word to say, they got essentially quote unquote canceled. And that's another thing that I want to talk about here. We need to let people express their viewpoints about a certain thing the way they feel like they're comfortable in expressing it, for one thing. They're scared of saying the wrong thing as well. They're scared of saying something that might make it worse on them because they don't know if they're walking on eggshells when they say it. They don't know what's going to be the correct way. And unfortunately, that is something of the vernacular that we have created because of another factor that goes into all of this. I did say I blamed Trump for a lot of this. He instigated a lot of this. And of course, right-wing media, Fox News, REN, those people, while they may have not realized that they were instigating it, they kind of fed into the machine. They kind of fed that monster. They kind of fed that beast, either indirectly or unintentionally, or they intended to do that sort of thing. They might have not known how bad it was going to get, but they certainly were not helping. That's what I want to say. However, one of the things that I also thought about, and I viewed a few particular YouTube channels in order to get some grasp of what they were thinking, and I did come across a few that did say something, and I thought of this as well. And I want to bring this up, is that it's not particularly just right-wing media or right-wing fringe groups that are contributing to this sort of vernacular. How many times have we turned on the Young Turks and have them absolutely lose their minds because a contributor, a former contributor like Dave Rubin or Jimmy Dore or Kim Iverson decided to say something that they didn't agree with, and they go all in with their criticism and their absolute horror that this person existed or said something. I can't believe how many times I've had to hear on the Young Turks that Dave Rubin took a crap that day. How many times are they going to talk about him? I understand maybe he's a grifter and stuff like that, but how many more times are you going to bring him up? And that goes the same with Jimmy Dore recently. Now all of a sudden they have a feud with him, or at the very least Sam Cedar has a feud with him, and I'm not sure what that's all about. The problem here is that it's not just the right wing that's causing these people to go all in with this sort of thing and resulting in what we saw on Capitol Hill that day. And it's not just left-wing media and left-wing YouTube channels. I'm also talking about places like Reset Era, places like r/politics, r/coronavirus. Those places are getting out of control, and there's nothing stopping them from going out and saying whatever they want to say about anybody who dares to disagree with them even the slightest bit. And then you take class warfare, in which you see, and I'm not the biggest expert on this, so I may be screwing this up too, but the way that these elite people seem to want to thumb their nose at anybody who they think is below them and call them alt-right or label them however they want to label them, whatever hysteria works that day, because they feel like they're below them. Look who's below us. They are not on the same level as us. Even though they do say, oh, they're working for the middle class, chances are they probably are not, because you're not as good as they are. You're not as good as the people from CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever outlet you want to choose. And so you see people getting upset that their voices are not being heard, that they need jobs, they need some relief. And they're not seeing it, and instead they're being told that they don't matter, or because they don't agree with that particular instance of what they called racism or sexism or what have you, that you don't believe that sexism or racism or misogyny exists at all. Or the people who are trying to get somebody to talk to and no one will ever talk to them because they are seen as beneath them, as I said, or they have some sort of illness that they don't want to deal with, whether it be mental or physical or what have you. So what ends up happening? What ends up happening is that they feel disenfranchised, and sometimes they end up becoming disenfranchised. We all talk about the celebrities who get canceled all the time, but what about the people who we don't hear about? What about the normal person who ends up getting accused of racism or something like that, or somebody who is told that they're beneath them, these more elite groups, because maybe they had a pre-existing condition and couldn't get medical care, or couldn't get a job because they were quote unquote too qualified, or what have you. What ends up happening? They end up trying to find the place that will take them, will accept them. And usually what ends up happening is these hate groups like the Proud Boys, which I did not know even existed until last year, and of course other hate groups will find them and they will try to recruit them on the basis that, hey, we'll take you in, we'll listen to you, we'll give you the platform to say whatever you want to say or to do whatever you want to do. And these unsuspecting people who are just trying to find a place to quote unquote belong, who might not know anything about these groups, will end up joining these groups because, hey, they're listening to me, they're saying what I want to hear, they're giving me the attention that I needed, that I felt like I needed, they're saying what I want to hear. The problem is that they don't know what they're getting themselves into, and then what happens is that they get brainwashed into believing whatever they're saying, into believing things like everybody's against you, everybody's out to get you, and you end up with all these brainwashed people who all they needed was to have somebody listen to them, somebody who is actually sane, not like the Proud Boys, but somebody who is sane, who absolutely knows what they're talking about, who can actually help them. And by helping them, maybe all they really need to be helped is to have somebody know that they care enough to listen to them. Even if you can't do anything for them as far as maybe giving them assistance or physical help or mental stability, maybe all they need is like, hey, do you care enough in order to be there and to be that ear that day? And then they get preyed upon by these hate groups, and then you end up where you have right now. And unfortunately, that sometimes leads to what you saw. Now, does that mean that it's condonable? Absolutely not. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. No one's condoning what happened that day. The people who went into that Capitol building are thugs, full throttle. But how did it become that way? And this is just from somebody who is an observer, who is looking at this and seeing all of this and thinking maybe out loud as to what exactly is happening, and maybe my viewpoints and my thoughts are not all fleshed out, but this is something I just needed to get off my chest here, because I feel as though we're headed down a road in which has no turnaround if we don't find one now. Yes, everybody who needs to be held accountable should be held accountable, from the top of the line down on the bottom. That needs to happen, and that goes without saying. Trump needs to leave ASAP. The sooner the better. If it's January 20th, then yes, it's January 20th. If it's sooner, it's sooner. Just, I can't wait till he gets out. That way we can heal this country. At the same time, however, we need to understand that he might not be the only problem here. That there might be a fringe group of the left wing, as there is with the right wing, that does everything wrong. And I've seen that everybody's been trying as hard as they can in order to stop this, but it seems like there's no slowing it down. No matter what they say to him, it just encourages them to go further. And I don't understand it. When will they understand that they might be part of the problem as well? That this cancel culture might be part of the problem as well. Now, I'm not saying, oh, Chris Pratt or stuff like that, even though if we can't save a celebrity from getting canceled, what's stopping them from canceling somebody who we might never know needed the assistance that we gave Chris Pratt or Emma Watson or anybody like that? Not saying they didn't need the assistance, but if we can't help them, well, who's stopping them, the cancel culture mob, from going after anybody who can't get their voice heard that something's happening and they need help in order to stop the mob from going after them? When will the mainstream media call this out? When will the mainstream media ever say, you know what, we really do need to focus our attention on both sides of the spectrum, and maybe this is both sidesism or whatever you want to call it, and maybe the two-party system needs to be more of a three-party or four-party system. Maybe there needs to be a third party that is more viable than what the other two parties, Libertarian and Green Party, are right now. Maybe that's the problem here, is that we only hear about two sides of the coin, Democrat, Republican, or left and right wing. What if there's a third wing out there? But this should be a big wake-up call, and maybe I'm not fleshing it out enough. I'm just trying to get my initial thoughts in place. Maybe I'll focus on things a bit more in subsequent videos, because I think this is something that needs to be further examined as it pertains to how maybe the other side of the coin is just as guilty in inflaming the mob as the right wing was in this case. And I know I'm just this global person that's doing a channel on YouTube, but maybe we need to hear from normal people. Maybe it's time we hear from the people who don't have that voice. Maybe we need to have that discussion of what will happen if somebody does get disenfranchised. Maybe instead of canceling somebody who was with the Ku Klux Klan or the Proud Boys, maybe we need to talk to them and understand how they ended up getting into that sort of mentality, and how they were getting preyed upon, and how they were able to get out in time. I understand that I went back and forth between different things. Maybe I'll flesh things out in subsequent videos that lets me talk about one specific aspect of what I just said in this one. However, in the meantime, I want to hear all your thoughts about what happened that fateful day that will live in infamy for a long, long time. I want to hear your agreements or disagreements, or who you you think's to blame, or if you think anybody's to blame. What do you think should happen now? What do you think needs to happen now in order to make sure something like this never does happen again? Because I'm pretty sure we don't want it to ever happen again. Remember, all viewpoints are welcome here as long as they are civil and don't attack anybody else, me included. You can disagree with me and have criticism about me as long as you don't try to attack me or call anybody names. You know how that's going to work here. And of course, to the people who did storm the Capitol and did whatever they were thinking they were going to do, you didn't scare anybody. You didn't accomplish anything. And you got people to go against you now. So I hope you thought it was worth it, because I don't think it was worth it. And yes, I do condemn all the stuff that happened there. I think that goes without saying. I'm JD Shadow, and that just happened.